we have started recording the webinar.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, lovely. Hello everybody, good afternoon. Today, I and my colleagues, we are going to give you a short webinar and presentation on new age of sustainability in public procurement.
Your microphone, Dibya. Dibya, yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, now yes.
Yes. Sorry for the problem. Hello everybody. My name is Dibya Rathi, and today I would like to thank you all for first of all for participating in this webinar on the new age of sustainability in public procurement. Before starting, I would like to briefly introduce the network that we represent. It's called SAPIENS Network. SAPIENS Network is funded under the Horizon 2020 project of the European Union. It's a consortium of 10 beneficiary universities, 15 early stage researcher projects that each 15 PhD students are undertaking, and there are 18 partner organizations. The coordinator of this project is University of Turin in Italy, and the focus is on interdisciplinary research in the evolving use of public procurement to address social and environmental challenges. To just show you the network, this is from last year at the meeting in Budapest, Hungary. So these are the people from the network. Now moving on to briefly introduce myself, I am Dibya Rathi, an early stage researcher of the SAPIENS network. I'm based as a PhD candidate in sustainable supply chain management at the Corvinus University of Budapest, Hungary. My research topic is on gender responsive public procurement. Within this, I focus on fostering women-owned businesses through public procurement. So first of all, to introduce the topic of public procurement and sustainable public procurement, I'd like to define what sustainable public procurement is. So sustainable public procurement is a strategic approach where the governments leverage the purchasing power to acquire goods, services, and works that meet societal needs while minimizing the environmental impact and maximizing economic efficiency. This core philosophy translates towards responsible spending and value for money so that it's beneficial to society, to the environment, and to the public in the long run. Now, encouraging the participation of women-owned businesses in public procurement is a very recent topic and quite talked about. But for this, first we have to understand what is a women-owned business. So what is a women-owned business? The majority of organizations and countries agree on this definition that it should be 51% owned by one or more women, as well as it should be controlled and operated by majority women, often with decision-making authority. Now, controlling and operated by women is very important because in the past it has been found that a lot of time women were just made owners, but the control still remained with majority men, just to benefit from policies that were catered towards women-owned businesses. Now, oftentimes, these organizations which are led and operated by women are certified by third-party organizations. One of the certifying agencies is We Connect International, but the certification for recognition as a women-owned business is not always mandatory. Usually, self-certification works with controls because certifying is also expensive at times. So now, are women-owned businesses participating in public procurement? For us to understand and foster and talk about the participation of women-owned businesses, we need to understand what is the present concentration of women-owned businesses in public procurement. And you will be surprised to know that only 1% of US dollars 11 trillion, which is the public procurement spending all of globally, is awarded to women-owned businesses. So this is as per World Bank data in 2021, and unfortunately the figures have not improved yet. So this is a big problem. Now, we would like to also, you may ask me, why is this the case? So there are several reasons behind this. A few of them are financial barriers and limited capacity. So what happens is women-owned businesses tend to be smaller in sizes compared to the traditional businesses, because of which they have limited capacity in terms of resources, manpower, as well as financial barriers, because research shows that women unfortunately face biases while accessing capital and loans. Furthermore, there is unequal access to information and resources. Now, this goes back to the previous point of limited capacity. Due to limited capacity and human resources, women-owned businesses have lesser access to information and resources compared to traditional organization. Furthermore, there is lack of awareness of opportunities. A lot of times, for women-owned businesses, they are not aware that they can actually participate in public procurement opportunities. Furthermore, the complex and lengthy public procurement procedures are a deterrent and they do not motivate women owned businesses to participate compared to just dealing directly with private businesses. Furthermore, there is also inadequate national legislation and policies. The lack of legislation and policies uh, makes it not mandatory for the organizations to let women owned businesses participate in public procurement, making it harder for them. Furthermore, there is lack of targeted outreach specifically to women-owned businesses by the public sector, which does not motivate them enough to participate. Now, I'd like to talk about a phenomenon. It's called glass wall effect. This phenomenon is quite popular in literature, in the studies of gender inequality, and it talks about the mythical glass ceiling and uh, a deterrent which usually stops women-owned businesses or women generally to participate from public procurement for reasons such as if they are using, let's say, some quotas or set asides, then they are considered as less competitive and just by being able to participate because they had such set aside rules and not because they were competitive. So it's considered that as a favor for women to be participating in public procurement rather than them being competitive and actually fighting fairly. Next thing that I would really like to emphasize is a phenomenon that I read about during my research as a PhD student. It's called Queen Bee phenomenon. Queen Bee phenomenon is very interesting because it says that usually a lot of times it's a woman who is hindering another woman's success. So for example, if there was a women-owned business which actually participated in public procurement, but they underwent through a lot of hardships, then what happens is they do not want to share this knowledge of their and experience and their experiences with other businesses because they don't want it to be easy for other women-owned businesses when they had to go through a lot of hardships. So this phenomenon is very interesting and it's called Queen Bee phenomenon. Finally, traditionally, we have a lot of cultural barriers and unequal share of family responsibilities. We are in the age of equal pay and maternity and paternity leaves, but however, this is a consistent problem where the share of family responsibilities are still unequally divided between men and women, and this impacts their participation in public procurement as well. Next, we now understand the problem, but what can be done to foster these women-owned businesses in public procurement? So the solution is gender responsive procurement. Now you may ask me, what is gender responsive procurement? Gender responsive procurement is a strategic approach to purchasing that considers the impact of procurement practices on gender equality and women's empowerment. Now it doesn't just work on the aspect of fostering women-owned businesses in the procurement process. That is one of the steps. But it also works by considering the impact of the government's spending and the purchase products and services on women as users of services that the procurement process is providing. And the focus is on ensuring fair labor practices and equal opportunities for both men and women in the supply chain. So how can this be done? What are the ways in which we can support women-owned businesses through gender-responsive procurement? The first is through reserve contracts and direct buying. Reserve contracts here stands for setting a certain percentage of the government buying for women-owned businesses specifically. Second is direct buying. Direct buying here reflects when products that are being purchased through public procurement are beyond a certain threshold, then they can be bought directly without opening the tender to the public. In this case, rather than focusing on the cheapest product, maybe the products can be bought from women-owned businesses. The second is encouraging collaboration and inclusion as subcontractors. During my research, what I have found is a lot of time women-owned businesses are too small to participate in a big public procurement tender. What happens is a lot of time they do not have the experience, they do not have the money, they do not have the resources. However, if we include them as subcontractors rather than the primary contractor, they can still participate in public procurement, and they can actually learn, they can network with other contractors, and in this way it actually helps them to participate first as subcontractors, and then the hope is that maybe some days they actually become big enough to participate themselves as primary contractors. The third is capacity building and training of both public buyers and women-owned businesses. Here, it's not just about capacity building and training of women-owned businesses. It's one aspect, but training the public buyers is also important, making them aware of the unconscious biases that they might have towards women-owned businesses or females, as well as the ways in which they can support women-owned businesses is important. Furthermore, there is need for greater advertisement and awareness of opportunities. A lot of times, women-owned businesses are not aware of the opportunities provided by the public sector, by the public procurement process. And if they would be aware, maybe we could encourage their participation. One of the strategies that is being used by governments all over the world is e-procurement. E-procurement stands for electronic procurement. With this, what happens is information is available online in the internet. You don't have to browse through different newspapers and whatever for finding the information. So this way, everybody has equal access to opportunities. Similarly, simplifying and streamlining the procurement process is very important. This is because at the current time and in the past, procurement has been a very complex process with a lot of different stages and a lot of documentation requirement. Along with this, one of the problems faced by women-owned businesses, which tend to be SMEs, the small and medium-sized enterprises mostly, is that the government payback period is usually longer. Currently, it's 30 days in most of the EU countries at least, but this lack of funds released from the government actually impacts a small business more than a bigger business who can wait for the operations money. And finally, monitoring, evaluation, and improvisation of initiatives is necessary to foster women-owned businesses. This is because we can have as many policies as we want, but if we do not monitor the progress of these policies and evaluate their impact, then we do not know what was right, what was wrong, and how we can improve them for future. So these are some of the strategies in which ways we can improve gender responsive procurement. But now it's a very good philosophy, but we have to understand, does it work? So I'd like to bring to your focus some countries and some regions of the world where it's being adapted. So first of all, as we are in the EU currently, I'd like to talk about the European Union. In the European Union, there are several EU directives that are relevant for gender responsive procurement. Although the EU directives do not directly explicitly mention gender responsive procurement, but they do support gender responsive procurement. For example, the Public Procurement Directive 2014 of the EU emphasizes on transparency, non-discrimination, and equal treatment of public procurement procedures, which indirectly supports GRP objectives. This is because it's not always about active discrimination, but there is unconscious discrimination and non-equal treatment between men and women, which due to this directive could lead to equal treatment and non-discrimination. Furthermore, there is a directive on equal treatment in employment occupation of 2000. This prohibits discrimination on the basis of gender in the workplace, and it's applicable to public procurement as well. So, but one of the strategies of EU, the EU Gender Equality Strategy 2020-2025, is the prime focus of gender responsive procurement at the moment, because it emphasizes on empowerment of women, including access to public procurement markets. Now, this was European Union at a broader sense, but within European Union, different countries have different degrees of gender-responsive procurement strategies in place. Some have adapted it in their national policies, while others rely on it as a voluntary measure. So there's different degree of implementation of gender-responsive procurement in different EU countries. I'd like to highlight the case of Spain that requires a minimum of 30% of public contracts to be reserved for SMEs that are owned by women. Now, this is 30% might not seem a lot, but for women-owned businesses, 30% of public contract is a very big deal. Similarly, France is offering simplified procedures and financial support for women-owned businesses to participate in public procurement. Well, as per research in public procurement and gender inequality, one of the biggest constraints faced by women-owned businesses to participate in public procurement is actually lack of financial support and lack of access to bank loans. And even when they access bank loans, a lot of time the rate of interest that is given to a traditional organization compared to a small women-owned business is usually is marginally bad for women-owned businesses, so they suffer. With this initiative from France, hopefully women-owned businesses can get more access to finance and participate in public procurement. Similarly, in Netherlands, they encourage the public buyers to consider gender equality criteria, starting from the evaluation process of the tender itself. So in this case, the focus is on that the bidding companies which are participating in the public tender are gender equal. Now I'd like to take you to USA. In the US Women-Owned Small Business Program is one of the precedents in terms of gender-responsive procurement, and they have a set aside of 5% specifically for women-owned small businesses. To be eligible, the business must again be 51% owned, controlled, and managed by one or more women who are US citizens. This approach, the program has been successful. However, until now, it has not been able to reach the 5% set aside that was kept for women-owned small businesses, because in 2022, out of 694 billion that were awarded in federal contracts, although there was a set aside of 5%, only 4.6% of all the federal contracting dollars were spent on women-owned businesses. Now, if you see here, although there was a set aside of 5%, yet 4.6% of all the participants were women-owned businesses. Now, there is a gap. This gap showcases that even if there are set asides and there are policies, the lack of competitiveness of women-owned businesses is a problem for them to participate in federal and public procurement contracts. Now, when we move to the African continent, South Africa is the leader with the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act. This allows the government and the contracting authorities, depending on different contracting authority, there is no specific reservation percentage, but there is a requirement for one to qualify as So a certain percentage is reserved for women-owned businesses and other such diversified groups to participate in procurement policy. Last year in 2020, the South African president announced that a target is allocating 40% of the public procurement spending to women-owned businesses will be laid out. However, this has not yet been implemented in the law. If this happens, it will be one of the biggest set aside for women-owned businesses in public procurement. Now, I'd like to also mention Chile. In Chile, in South America, Chile Compra is a public procurement agency, which was designed by the government to streamline and centralize the procurement process. Chile Compra is one of the leading agencies to promote women-owned businesses in public procurement through their Celo Empresa Mujer seal. It's a women business owner seal. It was launched in 2015, and they go through a rigorous process of certifying women-owned businesses to foster their visibility and recognition in the public procurement process. Furthermore, this women-owned businesses who have the women's business seal can register themselves in Mercado Público platform, which is again provided by Chile Compra. In this platform, the public buyers can visualize who are the women-owned businesses to identify them and then buy from them as a way of targeted purchases. Furthermore, they have an inclusive development law that favors women-owned businesses in specific situations. For example, when they are buying directly from for lower value purchases. Similarly, there is also focus on training and capacity building for both public buyers and women-owned businesses. Now, since the establishment of Chile Compliance and its strategies on women-owned businesses, as of 2018, the participation rate of women-owned businesses in the public market has increased by 25%, which is a very significant growth in terms of public sector empowerment of women-owned businesses. Next, I would like to talk to you about South Korea. Coming from Asian continent, they have their Public Procurement Act 2007 and its enforcement decree in 2018 allows certain specific percentage of contracts. For example, currently it's 30% to be reserved for participation of women-owned businesses as well as social enterprises. Furthermore, they have a point-based bidding system where each bidder is ranked and provided certain points on the basis of their bid quality. In this, if you are a women-owned business, you get additional points in the evaluation process, and this actually helps these businesses to enhance their competitiveness. South Korea has further simplified its processes of public procurement to benefit the women-owned businesses and has implemented smaller lot values and contract sizes. Furthermore, they are also regularly reporting and monitoring the participation of women-owned businesses in public procurement. Moving on to the Middle East, Lebanon is a precedent in terms of gender responsive procurement in the Middle East. Their public procurement law of 2021 focuses on competition and transparency, which benefits women-owned businesses by creating a fair and level playing field, as well as reducing the opportunities for discrimination. And they are trying to adapt a sustainable public procurement perspective, which again, because gender responsive procurement and gender equality is a social aspect of sustainability, so women-owned businesses are benefiting from this. One of the things that I would like to mention about Lebanon is the creation of complaints authority. It's a body of the public procurement system that is responsible for grievances handling and complaints in the public procurement system. Now, why I talk about this and why it is important is because a lot of time women-owned businesses particularly feel that they are not well treated by the procurement system, and they do not know what went wrong. So in this case, if there is an active grievance redressal mechanism, this helps the women-owned businesses understand what can be done and how to improve. So that's why I think it's a very nice initiative from Lebanon. Now, we're talking about different countries as public buyers, but public buyers are not just countries. They can also be intergovernmental organizations. These are organizations that are funded by public money. One of the predominant organizations that I'd like to talk about is World Bank. World Bank is one of the largest donors for development projects all over the world, and they're also focusing on inclusive procurement as a public sector organization. And this is in both their bank finance projects as well as corporate procurement. They have diversity and inclusion goals and are monitoring the progress. Along with this, they are actively collaborating with other organizations for both staff training, information dissemination on opportunities for women-owned businesses, as well as knowledge sharing, which I think is very important, because when you transfer your learnings from a particular project to other organizations at large, then it creates an opportunity for everybody to learn. Furthermore, they're organizing a lot of training and workshops on inclusive procurement practices and providing networking opportunities for women-owned businesses. World Bank actually collaborates with We Connect, the organization that certifies women-owned businesses, to certify these businesses and train women and use We Connect's network of women-owned businesses to train them and network with them. Also, they have a lot of online resources, publication, as well as their e-procurement platform. The e-procurement platform of World Bank is very comprehensive, and it includes a lot of tutorials that can be used by potential women-owned businesses as suppliers to understand how to move forward with the procurement process. One of the important strategies that is being used by World Bank specifically to foster women-owned businesses is inclusion of them as sub-suppliers. Now, this is not a mandatory requirement. However, they strongly encourage their suppliers to include women-owned businesses as suppliers, with the aim that this can lead to inclusiveness as well as training of women-owned businesses and their understanding of how public procurement works. Furthermore, in terms of bank finance projects, World Bank aligns with the national gender responsive procurement efforts of the country in which it's financing the projects and helps the government achieve it. So I'd like to just conclude my part of the presentation with my overall outlook on gender responsive procurement, that the lack of access to public procurement opportunity actually contributes to gender inequality, and this is a political problem. Now, why do I say this is a political problem? Because it's interesting that I had the opportunity to interview a lot of public sector buyers, and their primary reason of what can be done towards gender inequality and how to encourage more women-owned businesses is it needs to be part of the ruling party's agenda. If it's not, then it's really hard to implement gender responsive procurement, because until and unless the political movement supports it, then they have a lot to think about. I mean, there are so many sustainability issues. The problem is what to focus on. So with that, I would like to conclude my part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you to you, Dibya. So we can go with the other speaker, Xinyue. Please, you can share your presentation.
Can you see my slides? Is it at the full screen mode? Okay. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Xinyue Xue. I'm based at the University of Birmingham. My PhD project is in the law department, and same as Dibya, I'm also early stage researcher at the SAPIENS network, which is short for Sustainability and Procurement in European, national, and in international context. My specific research project is empowering small and medium-sized enterprises in public procurement, which I can draw a lot of synergies between my project and what Dibya has presented here. My presentation will be from a larger scope about why we support SMEs in public procurement and what are the legal measures to support them. And because my PhD project is a comparative law and economics analysis among countries, including European Union member states such as Germany, and also about the United States practices and the rules on promoting SMEs. So in this presentation, I will briefly introduce you to the different practices between these countries. Okay, so as we all know, small and medium-sized enterprises are the backbone of national economies and crucial actors in the global economy. And according to the World Bank statistics, it shows that SMEs contribute to more than 50% of GDP and employment in the national economy. But more than one country also recognize the fact that they are underrepresented in public procurement. And the reason is mainly about the various barriers they are facing in public procurement compared with large businesses when they are competing together. Well, before going into the problems they are facing and the strategies to support them, I would like to briefly discuss when we are talking about SMEs, who are we talking about? And in this definition part, it really depends on different countries' development levels and the different characteristics of the economy. In the European Union, at the moment, there is no legal mandatory requirement for this definition. As I said, mainly because there are different levels of development across member states. A small business in one member state can be a large business in another member state. So currently this definition is only in a recommendation in 2003 recommendation. And this definition mainly focuses on the numerical indicators rather than qualitative aspects. And the micro enterprises are defined as up to 10 employees in this firm. And for small enterprises, it's 50 employees, and medium-sized enterprises is 250 employees. The staff headcount is the most important indicator in this definition. According to this recommendation, those financial indicators listed on the right side are also using, but as long as the enterprise satisfy one of these two financial indicator, it can be regarded as an SME. And this is a self-certified approach. There is no European level authority to certify small business certification. And this definition has been used in the current public procurement directives in terms of the reporting. For example, when national public authorities upload the procurement contract data into the TED database, they need to refer this definition for the bidders and contractors in their procurement. Well, going further to the United States part, because I compare the different legal rules and measures in procurement. So in the United States, they are taking a different approach to define SMEs. Actually, this term is not being used there. They use small businesses to define this scope of enterprises. Well, you may ask, will the small businesses defined in the United States actually exclude medium-sized enterprises? The short answer is no, because they are not comparable with what we understand here in the European Union. First of all, it focuses on the qualitative aspects. These two requirements are laid down in their law, the Small Business Act, which means the small firm needs to be independently owned and operated. Also, they have non-dominance in their relevant market of the field of operation. And about the numerical size standards, they are defined by the Small Business Administration, which is an independent federal agency under the supervision of Congress. And the size standards are also updated by the SBA. And it is most important, it is a sector industry-based definition. Here I copied only a small part of the sector utilities. And from this definition, we can see the size standards for the employees are up to 1,000 employees in some industries, for example, the electric power distribution. And these two numerical indicators are only used like choosing either the financial indicator or the employee indicator based on different sectors. So this is what we are talking about in the United States about small businesses. And in some sectors, a small business in the US, for example, this natural gas distribution, up to 1,000 employees can be definitely a large business in the European context. So from this understanding, we can agree that the SMEs and the small businesses actually are referring to a large scope of enterprises compared with those large businesses in the economy. So after figuring out what are the SMEs we're talking about, then the next question is, okay, they are a large group of enterprises. Why do we need to support SMEs? So this is from a report commissioned by the European Commission. In this report, they compared the contribution of SMEs to the economy, for example, the employment or the turnover or GDP, and also their contribution to public procurement. And the difference is significant. I didn't put the graph here, but the difference is in most member states, SMEs' contribution to the economy are significantly higher than their contribution to public procurement. And in this report, there are a number of barriers and problems discussed here. And all these problems are reported by the SMEs across member states. For example, the large contract volumes means sometimes the public procurement contracts are too large, which the SMEs lack the capacity to undertake them. But at sometimes the contracts are not too large, but the technical or financial qualification requirements are so high. For example, a procurement contract value is only 1 million euro, but the contracting authority require all the tenderers to have annual turnover over 5 million euros. In that way, the financial criteria are quite disproportionate and excessive. And on the other side, there are problems of SMEs of their own. For example, the limited tendering skills and experiences, or they are lack of knowledge about the procurement procedures. So all these problems listed here are not just exclusively faced by SMEs or small bidders. Large businesses may also face the same problems, but they have better skills and more experience to cope with these problems. So all of this fact leads to the disadvantaged position of small bidders in public procurement. And we care about this because in the long term, if this market excludes small bidders, then there is the risk that the large business may lock in the public authorities in terms of the prices or the contract performance, etc. Since in this webinar, we're talking about sustainable public procurement, and this can be also understood from the SME perspective, because according to the SDGs laid down by the United Nations, SMEs contribute a lot to the local economic development and more inclusive economy. For example, what my colleague has discussed about the women-owned businesses and empowering them in the economy. So from SME development to sustainability, there are various tools can be used. Among all of them, there will be the rule of public procurement, and this should not be overlooked because better access to public procurement for SMEs means they can get more business opportunities in the public sector. In this way, they gain more experiences and they can have more skills trained in this process to be used in the private market as well. While other tools, including better access to finance or training programs operated by the national authorities. On the other side of this slide, from public procurement to sustainability has also been discussed widely these years. And among these tools, one of which is highlighted is more participation from SMEs. As I discussed, because more participation from SMEs bring more competition. More competition is beneficial for better value for money, and also to decrease the risk of large businesses locking the public procurement prices and cost. So these are the justifications for us to support SMEs in public procurement. Then what are the legal tools to use for SMEs? So the first country that I would like to discuss actually is the jurisdiction is the European Union. And in the Directive 2014-24, they highlighted the needs for public procurement authorities to consider the needs of SMEs and to make use of the Code of Best Practices set out in the Commission Staff Working Document. This document has been laid down in 2008, but since it is not a hard law, it is only a soft law approach. Not many member states are using the measures laid down in that document. And the European Union referred to this document by implementing the division to lots in this directive, and also other measures such as the turnover requirement cap, which means the member states should require the contracting authorities not to require the turnover over twice the contract value in the tendering document. And deviation to lots is like making the deviation to lots into a default approach for all the member states. The member states can choose to make it a mandatory approach for the contracting authorities to divide large contracts into lots. If they do not make it a mandatory approach, the contracting authorities should explain why they are not dividing the contract into lots according to Article 46 of this directive. And another measure is the European Single Procurement Document, which will ease the administrative burden for the small bidders. So these are the current measures laid down in the European Union, where when we talk about the measures in the United States, they are taking a very different approach. So the Small Business Act, the law required that the small business concerns should be considered in the federal procurement level. And in the state procurement level, they are also referring to the act and taking the experiences from the federal procurement into the state procurement level. And this act requires that a fair proportion of the total purchases should be reserved for small businesses. And similar to what Dibya discussed, 5% of the federal budget should go to small businesses, should go to the women-owned small businesses. And for the overall scope of small businesses, this numerical number is 23%. And all of these set-aside programs are operated by the federal agencies, and the federal agencies need to talk about the numerical target annually with the Small Business Administration. It is a mandatory rule for the federal government to reserve the contracts for small businesses for at least 23%, but for each federal agency, the goal might be different. But these years, the performance of this goal is not so satisfying. It only has been met consistently since 2013. And this goal have not been reached more than 27% of the government budget. So in my research, I categorized these measures into mainly two types. The preferential measures, which means those measures prefer SMEs over non-SMEs. They provide them with a preference, such as the reserved contracts, because they limit this entry into competition only among those enterprises. And they do not provide this preference for other bidders who are not small businesses or not in this target group. Another similar measure is the price preferences, which means in the evaluation period, the contracting authorities will put in 5% extra price on the large businesses over the small businesses, so they will have a preference in this valuation stage. And other measures, for example, what the European Union are adopting is the facilitative measures. They do not provide the small business preference, but they encourage them to participate in procurement by lowering the transaction cost of the process or simplifying those requirements or dividing the contract into lots to make the contracts more accessible. How to choose among the different measures is a trade-off between different pursuits in public procurement. As I said, in public procurement, there are different pursuits. There could be the sustainability pursuits about the environment, about human rights, and SMEs, or other social aspects like promoting women-owned businesses or minority-owned businesses. And choosing different measures will have impact on different goals and pursuits. And these are all the considerations that the stakeholders and policymakers should consider. This is my presentation, and I look forward to any questions in the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you to you. And so we can continue with Enrique, the last presentation. Please, Enrique, go.
Okay, can you see my presentation? Yes, all right. Okay, so I am Enrique Carreras. I am a PhD student in economics at Colegio Carlo Alberto, University of Turin. and I am also part of this SAPIENS network studying sustainability in public procurement. And today, I'm going to try to take a step back from this discussion of specific cases of sustainability in public procurement. And why am I studying sustainability in public procurement as an economist? So in general terms, public procurement typically explains a large share of modern developed economies. And so governments are interested in using it to attain complementary objectives. They can be green objectives, social objectives, but they can also be other kinds of objectives, such as innovation, being more secure in light of supply chain disruptions, security, many concerns. But in my studies, I'm going to focus on environmental and social objectives. In general terms, from the economic point of view, these policies are generally discouraged from theory, and it is recognized that they can result in trade-offs. There are cases where, of course, is the worst case scenario, everybody loses because the criteria or the way sustainability was introduced was poor, and so it is worse for firms, worse for the environment, let's say, worse for more costs, for whatever. So there could also be other cases where there are win-win scenarios. For example, some kinds of life cycle costing, where in the long term costs go down, and also you have better environmental indicators and so on. But in reality, most cases are somewhere in between, where you gain some and you lose some in terms of maybe you have to pay higher prices or some form of undesired distortion, while at the same time you achieve your goal of more sustainability in some sort of dimension. So what I do in my studies, in my projects, is I try to provide empirical evidence of what are these trade-offs. So today I will just provide a quick introduction into two of my projects. On the first project, I look into some potential costs or distortions of the introduction of sustainable work criteria, which is a specific kind of criteria that I will mention and explain ahead. And on the second project, I look at how these sustainability criteria affect firms. So first, how it affects contracts performance, and then how it affects firms' evolution. So before getting into the papers itself, I drew this diagram just to make it easy to understand, because these sustainability criteria, they are included in tenders as a kind of in a way softer approach to some of the things that Xinyue and Dibya were mentioning, because actually these criteria simply make the contracting authorities to take into that, they force contracting authorities to take into account some dimension that they were not previously considering. For example, it could be simply, okay, we're going to assign 10% of the overall rating of the bid to social issues, and it can be as vague as that, social issues. Or it could say there is a specific percentage assigned to emissions or something like this. So these kind of dimensions are added to the award criteria that is used by the contracting authorities. This can have a direct effect on the estimated price, because sometimes contracting authorities provide an estimated price for the contract, and effectively what happens is that firms compete in discounts towards this estimated price. And also it can have a direct effect on competition, because now there are new competitive advantages. And so it could be the case that firms that would have bid before, now they do not bid, because this new dimension was not considered before, and now they're not competitive anymore. Some firms may be unaffected, and some firms that were not bidding before now bid. So the number of bids effect, it's kind of undetermined a priori. We have to see what happens in practice. So this is one of the things I look at. And then I also look at the effect on the discounts. Remember, I told you that from the bidding firms, we then have a winning bid. And so we compare the estimated price with the winning bid, and we get a discount effect. This is important for some other things. So these purple two effects are one paper, which is the contract side. And my other paper is, okay, then I see the effect on firms' evolution. So from the observed winning bid, we get a firm that won a sustainable contract. How do these firms compare in terms of evolution with firms that win normal contracts, standard contracts without sustainable award criteria? This is my other project. And so for the first one, so the research question, it's called, by the way, it's called Sustainable Award Criteria, Bidding Behavior and Costs, Evidence from Spanish Public Contracts. I'm using public data from Spanish contracts, and I ask, how are contracts impacted by the inclusion of sustainable award criteria? I look at the number of bids, and I look at the discounts with respect to the price that was estimated by the contracting authorities. And I find something that is interesting, because if you look just at, in economics, we call it the descriptives, but these are regressions controlling for observable characteristics. We see that sustainable award criteria is associated with more bids, and there is no effect on discounts. But there is a significant confounding factor, which is that contracting authorities choose to include or not to include sustainable award criteria. And this is important because obviously correlation is not causation, and it is actually the case that contracting authorities include this criteria in the more attractive contracts. So this is an identification challenge from the empirical point of view. What I do, and I won't get too much into detail here, but we can discuss later, is I exploit the implementation of the 2014 directive in Spain, which induced many contracting authorities to include this kind of criteria, so sustainable award criteria, in cases where they wouldn't have done it otherwise. So we use this to try to find exogenous variation in the use of sustainable award criteria, so that we can isolate the effect of the criteria from the effect of contracts that are maybe more attractive for other reasons. So this is the main idea behind this identification strategy. I don't want to get too much into detail there, but the important thing is that our findings show that sustainable award criteria effectively reduces the number of bids, and it reduces them both in environmental award criteria and social award criteria. And this is, by the way, in line with recent evidence showing similar conclusions in terms of concentration risks when we include this criteria in contracts. And we also find that the discounts are reduced by 1 percentage point. This may seem like just a little bit, not enough, not important, but this would be a lower bound of the actual price effect, because remember that the estimated prices are also affected by this measure. So it makes sense that contracting authorities introduce sustainable award criteria, they estimate a higher price, but then the actual prices are higher with respect to that discount in normal contracts. So this is the first project. This is from that project. This is just showing how this directive that we are using to find this exogenous variation in sustainable award criteria caused an increase in the use of sustainable award criteria over time. And this is my second project. My second project is called Sustainable Award Criteria and Firm Growth, Evidence from Spanish Public Auctions. And the idea here is that there is recent evidence in economics that shows that winning a regular contract positively affects firms' evolution. But there is really not evidence about what happens in cases where sustainable award criteria is used. So it could be the case that it can help you. It could be the case that it is bad for you, because there are many things changing here, managerial choices, investment choices. So what we do here is we try to see how these sustainable award criteria contracts affect the evolution of firms with respect to firms that win normal contracts. Now, importantly, we use the public data that we were using before, but now we use also firm level micro data. And it has many more identification challenges, because now we have firms being treated at different periods in time. We have firms that are treated many times. But well, this is just this is all in the paper that will be out soon. But the important thing is that we do a difference in difference approach, meaning that we compare the evolution of the normal contracts with the evolution of the evolution of firms that win normal contracts with the evolution of firms that win these sustainable award criteria contracts over time. And the preliminary results show that actually the sustainable award criteria is not significantly affecting these positive effects, which is kind of a good news in a way. So because it could be the case that actually it could decrease the positive effects or nullify them in some way, because it could be forcing firms to change their managerial decisions, investment, etc. This is just descriptive evidence showing that in my case in Spain with this data, we do see the positive effects of winning a standard contract, which are more or less in line with previous evidence. This I'm not gonna get into because there's I think, yeah, okay. So the thing here is how to find the good counterfactuals here. What do you compare the firms that won these contracts with? And so what we do here, as I was saying, we will compare firms that won contracts through sustainable award criteria with firms that won contracts that didn't use sustainable award criteria. And so our assumption is kind of fair. It is that the evolutions of normal contracts is a good counterfactual. And what do we see? Okay, I'm going to spare you of the models, the econometrics and everything, because it's kind of too much for this session. But what do we see? Here we have the graph. You can think of this as the differences between the two groups before and after, years before and years after the contract was awarded. And as you see, when the bars are either completely below or completely above the red axis, the red line in the x-axis, that means that the effects are significant. As you can see, there are no significant effects. So basically, the groups were comparable before, and the groups are comparable after. And this is if we look at sustainable award criteria on its own as a whole, but we see the same for environmental award criteria, and we see the same for socially responsible award criteria. So what is the conclusion for this project? It's kind of anticlimactic for the paper, but it's not so bad, because in the end, the results tell us that firms that win sustainable award criteria contracts do not show significantly better nor worse evolutions. And this is also true when we look at environmental award criteria or socially responsible award criteria specifically. But yeah, I think this is a nice piece of evidence for policymakers to better assess and address the potential costs and benefits. We saw in the other project that I presented that there could be some competition risks, maybe some increasing costs, but it's not like you're gonna mess with the evolution of firms. At least we don't find evidence of that. And now for this project, we are evaluating other more direct outcomes. Maybe we're trying to see something on the effectiveness of these criteria themselves, which is not targeted so far in my studies. But I think that's enough. I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Enrique. So, thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. Now we have some time for the discussion. So does anyone have any question or feedbacks for our speakers? You can ask or comment or add some points. We have heard about different issues of SPP, the support of women-owned businesses from Dibya, the support of small and medium-sized enterprises from Xinyue. So the main legislation, the countries where they have innovative strategies. And the last presentation was about how this system works from an economic point of view. So we have three different studies related, but different one from each other. So Elena has a question.
So thank you very much to the speakers. Very clear presentations, even if we are not in the field. And I have a couple of paired questions for Dibya and one for Enrique. Sorry for Xinyue, it's not that it was not interesting, but their presentation I quoted something from my work, so I feel more comfortable speaking about what I know. So for Dibya, you mentioned the importance of impact evaluation, and this is my main field of work. And one of my strongest evidence is that you cannot evaluate seriously something where the goal cannot be represented by a variable, by an indicator. So my question is, which is the best variable you figure out to represent the goal of increasing the participation of women inside public procurement? And here comes the second question, because you spoke a lot of women businesses, but how you decide that a business is run by business. This is clear in case of individual small firms, but in case of limited companies, what do you do? Elena, shall I ask all the questions? You collect them, or I mute up and then ask to Enrique?
I think they can answer each question, or you can ask also the question for Enrique, and then they will respond one after the other. Probably it's better if you put the question also for Enrique, and so they can answer.
Okay, so Enrique, you woke me up when we started your presentation saying that economic literature says that it is not always a good idea to put limitations in tenders. And I agree with you, we do a tender because we seek for competition. And so anyway, we know that most of the sustainability goals are market failures. So there is some sense in making this. Here again, in my small experience, my opinion is that it is a good idea to regulate what you can measure. Okay, so I make you a direct example. I'm working on occupational safety and health, and there is a certification which certificates that you have a good management of this huge problem. And in our work, we discovered that the impact of those certifications is present in companies which in the past experienced serious accident, so the motivation is high, while in the others which probably got the certification just to apply to a tender, the impact is zero. So how you can, you are a public entrepreneur, you are a public manager, so how you can understand that really they are seeking the goals, the environmental goals or the social sustainability goals, etc. Otherwise, in my opinion, it would be better not to regulate or to change things. So you see that my questions are always on indicators, but there's a sense in this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elena, for your kind questions. I would like to go first because you asked me the questions first. First of all, about your question on what indicators are good. I think there are different indicators that are currently being used. One of them is definitely the amount of public spending that is going towards women-owned businesses. For me, I think that is not a good indicator, to be very honest with you, because usually because of the sheer size of women-owned businesses, they are usually more focused towards service industries rather than goods and construction and works procurement, which usually has a bigger volume. So in this case, I think personally, maybe the number of women-owned businesses that are participating would be a very good indicator to see and to focus by the public policies. The focus should be on increasing the participation of individual registered women-owned businesses. In this way, even if they are a small part of public procurement, that is actually signifying that there is a participation of women-owned businesses, and then they are growing together with public procurement. That would be my indicator towards measuring the success of gender responsive policies. Secondly, when we're talking about the private sector, I think even if the private sector entities are private, they still have registration documents and ownership requirement. And as I mentioned during my presentation, usually the requirement to be qualified a women-owned business is that the 51% ownership should be in the name of a woman, of one or more women. So I think if we look into this criteria of ownership and control of a privately owned firm, then we can still qualify them as women-owned private firms and general private firms. That would be my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dibya. And so, yeah, thank you very much for your question, Elena. It is totally on point, I think. In fact, these sustainable award criteria that I've been exploring, one of the things that I couldn't believe when I saw this is how vague they are. They are really vague. They talk about sustainability in general. They talk about social issues in general as a dimension itself, and the same with environmental. And actually, this means that, in fact, firms that are winning these contracts could be simply playing the low price game. And so you get all of the bad things, same as usual, but you're losing competition because bids are being reduced. So actually, I think that these kind of criteria that are vaguely defined are bad for sustainability. And in fact, there is a really recent paper that is super interesting, showing that when you include quality provisions that are vaguely defined in this kind of procurement contracts, it can actually cause high quality firms to refrain from bidding, and the other firms that do not care about quality, they bid either way because they don't care. They always play the low price game. And so I think that there is a danger of something like that also happening here, because if you don't define it well, maybe the more sustainably conscious firms are not bidding because they say, oh, I think they refer to this, which is actually much higher standards than the bidding firms are thinking. So I agree with you about this point of, okay, but what are we talking about? Let's put it like clearer and measure it. But unfortunately, I would say that this is not the case so far in what I've seen. There are some specific programs that have worked in the US mainly with disadvantaged firms, and I think that it's about subcontracting firms that are certified by the government as to be disadvantaged, basically. And so this approach has been proven to work well in terms of effectiveness, or for the inclusion of this kind of firms. But even this program that is like really well looked at, they had the same issue with concentration. But I do agree that this is one of the main issues to better define this. But unfortunately, I agree with you that this is not the case at all. But thank you for the question.
Okay, we have a question from the chat for Dibya. Someone is Anita. She's interested in the methods of your research, particularly in the interaction with public buyers. You mentioned it. So if you can explain something more about your methods, use it in the research. The microphone.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
We're listening, Dibya.
Yes. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you, Ankita, for your.
Yeah, you're kind of low. Your volume is low, I think.
Thank you, Ankita, for your question. So in the particular context that I mentioned was for one of my research papers, I was looking into the concept of short supply chains and if it could be a way out for participation of women-owned businesses in public procurement. So for this particular research, I reached out to public buyers in different EU countries and as well as in US. So actually, I reached out to public buyers in 8 countries from the EU and the US, so 9 in total. And the strategy for me to approach them was mostly random emails, to be very honest, and snowball sampling, because I asked one of the participants, okay, how if they knew somebody else, and that's how they referred me. But my idea with the interviewing, my approach was interviewing this public buyers and understanding their views towards gender responsive procurement, as well as short supply chains as a method to improve the participation of women-owned businesses in public procurement. Thank you. I would like to mention a very interesting finding I had during this interaction, and that was a lot of public buyers were actually very reluctant to accept that there was a problem of gender imbalance in public buying. They were like, we cannot just put set aside in quotas. You need to be competitive even if you're a women-owned business or not. So I think the overall finding for me, particularly from that research, was that even if you are a women-owned business, you just cannot take advantage of set asides to be participant, because you can maybe win the contracts for once, the public tenders, but the second time and the third time you will need to be competitive, and as competitive as any other business, to be a regular participant in the public procurement contracts and benefit from them. Thank you, Anita, for your question.
Then we have a question from Mario Nosvelli. Please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for your presentations. Very interesting and very, very on topic, I think. I had some question to Enrique about the presentation of Enrique. Just a very couple very, very simple questions, I think, in the sense that we are working on a project with the effect, the impact of green criteria in public procurement in Italy, and I wonder if there is a difference between what happens in Italy and what happens in Spain, in the sense that I don't know if I understood properly, but in Italy, green criteria are mandatory for every public procurement. I think it's the same in Spain, or not? Okay. See, because the problem is that even that green criteria are mandatory, they are formally mandatory, not concretely mandatory, in the sense that there is no control at all on what has been applied or not. So it's a problem to catch exactly what's been done or not, in the sense that people say, okay, we follow green criteria, but then there's no control. So the effect should be analyzed very carefully. And the second, I don't know if in Spain is like that. I am a bit curious about that. And the second question is a methodological question. Which kind of methodology you applied to results that should be considered not just in a monetary way, but also looking at concrete results, in the sense that literature I saw applies cost-benefit analysis, multi-criteria analysis, and other things like that, other stuff like that. But I don't know which one you applied for taking your results that are, for me, very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mario. And I think my internet went off a little bit, but I think I got both of the questions. So, but if I'm missing something, please let me know because I lost at some point. So, of course, there are sustainability provisions and inclusions of different sorts, and these overlap all the time, right? So what I'm looking at this with this project is a sustainable award criteria, which are not mandatory. In fact, you could simply forget about them and bid either way. You just bid, play the low price game, and you don't care about that, and maybe you win, maybe you don't. But it's a dimension that they consider, but it's not mandatory that you actually go ahead and do it. But at the same time, also in Spain, they have regulations and things that are actually in the technical regulations of the contract, and those you have to go and do that. Yeah, but this is like on top of everything else. There are other criteria. If you go out of your way to do something social or reduce emissions or something, but this is just the award criteria, not the technical regulations, which I think this is more what you refer, which are harder in a sense. So this is a difference, I think, to what you're studying. And the other question, remember that in my projects, I think that you're referring to how do I address the fact that maybe there are some downsides, maybe there are some upsides. How do you say what you should do? In my papers, I do not do that. I'm simply providing evidence of some of the downsides or potential downsides, and some of the things that are not so bad in terms of firm evolution, for example. But I'm not providing like a comprehensive way of saying, okay, then you should do it or you shouldn't do it. This is just evidence of some effects, which was missing in the literature. I think that's more or less the questions, but let me know if I'm missing something.
Maybe it's also useful that I read your paper. So
of course,
maybe,
yeah, I had 10, 15 minutes to present the two papers.
Yeah.
But just write me, of course. I'll send you. They are working papers at the moment, but yes.
Okay. I'll write to you for having
Thank
your
you.
paper.
Yes, sure, Mario.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? I have a question for Xinyue. Is about you talk about competencies of small and medium-sized enterprises and their key role in the participation of into the procurement process. I think that as have specific competencies that differentiate them from the big businesses. For example, the capacity to adapt to the situation, to be more, I don't know if the word is correct, more resilient probably. So you can explain to us which are these key competencies that you just mentioned in your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lena, for this question. And actually, it's also a section in my PhD thesis to discuss about if they have any advantages in procurement. And like you said, they can be innovative in some ways that large businesses are not willing to do these adaptations when they are only tendering for public contract, because for large businesses, they have better or they think they have other opportunities to work with. So they are not willing to take more costs to satisfy the requirements only in one tender. So small businesses can have those more adaptive skills, or they are willing to provide more after-sale services to the public authorities. Well, at the meantime, looking at the overview, they indeed have a lack of capacities in terms of the economies of scale or skills to work with the public authorities. So another measure to support them is to pair them with mentors who have more experiences in tendering. And in the United States, they have this mentor protege projects to pair one small business with one large business. And they form this consortium that they can bid for the reserved contracts. So in this way, they also encourage the large businesses to work more with the small business to combine the advantages of both of them. And in this way, to support SMEs to have more willingness and experiences in procurement. And I think in the European Union, there are also member states have this practice of consortium, but they are not currently in the public procurement law our current policies to pair them specifically with large businesses. Thank you.
Other questions? I had also a question for Dibya. I was quite surprised to hear that the European Union didn't support more directly the presence of women-owned businesses. Can you imagine why, or which are the reasons? Probably you don't have an answer, but I was surprised really, because so the initiative is from the member states, from individual states, and not at the European level. But why?
Elena, this is a hard question, to be very honest with you. But I think the problem with the European Union level is that it's so huge and so big, and they're trying to move together as an organization, trying to satisfy everybody. And I think that now currently the focus at the European Union has mostly been towards the environmental aspects of sustainability, for example, the climate change and recycling, reuse, and those kinds of aspects. So I think gender inequality hasn't been yet the limelight enough for them to think it at a bigger level. I think that could be one of the reasons. And then I think because a lot of member states, I'd not like to say this, but there is the West Europe, the East Europe, and some developed countries, underdeveloped countries. So I think from what I understand is a few countries think they are doing very well in gender inequality issues. They don't have the problem at all, while there are others who actually recognize that there is a problem. So mismatched views between the countries, and then trying to create a level field where everybody agrees to a consensus towards the problem is a big issue in itself. So I think that is one of the issues. And I think, as I mentioned in the presentation, that it's a political agenda. So, looking into gender responsive procurement is a political movement. So I think for now, the focus of the EU level politics and political agenda has been environmental sustainability. So we still have to wait for I think next 10, 15 years to let it to reach to the social sustainability levels. Thank you.
Thanks, Dibya. So, do you have any other questions or?
I'm sorry, but I got excited now, Elena. I just want to also, point out a little thing that before I started the PhD, coming from an Asian country, I come from Nepal actually. So I also believe that gender inequality was a very non-European problem. I mean, it was a third world problem, but and I think that is the same view for a lot of people also in Europe. It's really nice studying gender inequality, but nobody can think that, okay, gender inequality also exists in Europe, in the US. The most of the literature that I've actually looked into is from US and Europe, where they emphasize on the fact that the gender inequality is present. So I think there is a long way to go for the European Union, but we can really hope that they will take some proactive measures in the future. Thank you.
I was reading on the chat. Another question for Dibya. Do you think the ratio of male to female plays a role of parameter in how inequality plays a role, be it a small parameter? Do you understand the questions?
I think the question is towards understanding if the male-female ratio dynamics plays a role. I think it does. I mean, if there are more males in the society, definitely there is more male labor force available, so they will be getting more jobs and stuff like that. But I think that currently at the world level, maybe I'm not very much aware, but the male-female ratio is pretty balanced, and it should not be a problem. I think more than a ratio parameter, it is a cultural phenomenon that and the unequal distribution of workload, which creates gender inequality.
Maybe the question refers to the contracting authority ratio more than general population. I don't know, maybe.
Well, if it's on the contracting authority level, then it impacts, because also it has been found that women public buyers are more favoring. I mean, it's a very weird research outcome. I mean, it's not weird, but it's like something we don't think about. Is that there was a research done, and it was related to the queen bee phenomenon that I was trying to explain during my presentation, and the outcome of the research was that women buyers favor more male salespersons in general, compared to with equal qualifications between a female salesperson and a male salesperson. So yes, this gender dynamics are there, both from the supply side of women-owned businesses, as well as from a buyer's perspective of who is buying from the purchasing side. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we are at the end of our webinar. We are a minute left, but it was a very interesting. Your presentation were enthusiastic, and so I'm very proud for moderating this webinar. And it was a success, because we had 30 or more than 30 participants in this webinar. And so I wish you all the best for your PhD. And I thank you, and I thank all the participants for following the webinar. And I can close the registration, stop the registration, and say you goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Elena.
everyone.
Thank you,
And
everyone.
I'll be putting my email in the chat for everyone
Mhm.
who wants to write.
Okay.
Maybe girls,
Thank
you should
you.
do the same. It's there.